recording.
Just like this. I mean, look today. We didn't. Well, we really don't have a resolution.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and call to order the regular meeting of the City Council for July 5th, 2022. Councilmember Shin advised that he wouldn't be able to make it. He was out of state last minute. So with that, invocation and pledge of allegiance will be led by Councilmember Mazzoni.
Heavenly Father, we celebrated the freedom and birth of this great nation yesterday, and we thank you for your blessings on it, and hope that you grant your wisdom to our national leaders through these times of political strife. Also, as always, we hope your blessings on our deployed military and our first responders. In your name we pray. Amen. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. The next order of business is the approval of the minutes from June 21st. Y'all received a copy of that in your council packet.
Second.
We've got a motion and second to approve the minutes for June 21st regular meeting. Is there any discussion on that? Seeing none, all those in favor say yes.
Yes.
All opposed, no. Motion carries. Next order of business is public comment. I have one public comment card from Dan Bates. Dawn Bates, come on down. If you could state your name and address for the record, sir, and you have 3 minutes.
Dawn Bates, 14 Zircon Drive, Maumelle. And Mayor, I had a problem with AT&T on their fiber optic as they were doing. They tore up my driveway, and I talked to you and one of your assistants to get that straightened out. I had to make 2 trips, but they did some damage and didn't want to fix it. Well, they come back, and this time, I guess the grass where they had tore it up, they put dead grass in my yard where they were, I guess, trying to fill in. And, you sit there and wonder, what are these people thinking? It's dead grass. It looks, I have a pretty decent looking yard, me and my neighbor, and down the street. Why they would even bother to put dead grass? It's not something that's going to revive. It's dead. It's Bermuda. It would have been very simple not to have done that. And, but AT&T thinks they can do anything they want to do. And it's really irritating. I don't know if you've ever had any business that you had to do with AT&T dealing with your phones or your the TVs or anything like that. They're arrogant and they won't. They go do what they want to do. Anyway, you can't just totally blame their vendors or their contractors, because this is AT&T's method of operating. And and I'd like you to do something about it. And like anytime AT&T comes along, I think as a city government, you need to put somebody to watch them, because they're going to screw it up if at all possible. That's what I have saying. Is there anything you go be able to do for me about my dead grass?
Yes, sir. We'll make sure that it is restored. I saw some folks taking notes, and I've got it down here, and we'll be on that. We do assign a construction ops coordinator that follows back up through that process when they're done. So we'll make sure that it's put back as well as it can be.
Okay, I greatly appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. The next order of business is department report. Doreen Mattis, Human Resources. Come on down.
And I forgot my booster seat again. So much fun standing up here looking so tall. So we have a new member of the HR team. Ashley Pickard joined us in May, and I'm thrilled to have her on our team. She is replacing Leslie Lambert, who left us to take on a full-time role as Levi's mom. Levi was born on June 21st. The mission of the HR department remains the same: to provide exceptional service to our employees so our employees can provide exceptional service to our residents. I'm excited that we're implementing and will utilize UKG Ready. Currently, we are using bits and pieces of software to manage our applicant pool, our payroll, benefits, time and attendance, and leave. UKG Ready will give us a single HR solution that will streamline tasks, simplify onboarding, and allow for continuous improvement in one centralized place. I am proud to report that all 3 of our Project Search graduates are still employed at Maumelle Center on the Lake. You may recall they were part of a pilot program we started in March of last year. And since then, we have added 2 new Project Search graduates to our workforce. Some of our 2021 goals were to update the employee handbook, update various policies, and update our Civil Service Commission rules and regulations. We met part of those goals in 2021 and will continue to strive to make necessary updates in 2022. Some of our areas of concern last year were wage compression, below the market pay, and retention. I'm happy to report that our retention rate has significantly improved. I attribute that to remarkably better wages in the 2022 budget and retention pay through the American Rescue Plan Act. Our turnover ratio year over year is 27%. However, if we compare our turnover ratio from the last half of 2021 to the first half of 2022, that ratio drops to an acceptable 9.5%. We had significant turnover in the latter part of 2021 due to wage competition, aka Amazon. Related to pay and recruiting, as many other employers in and around Maumelle, we are still struggling to fill vacant positions post-COVID. Can I say post-COVID? Not sure. But most of our vacancies still remain in our manual labor positions in public works, and we continue to have a shortage of commercial drivers. This is a nationwide problem, and we're looking at creative ways to solve that dilemma. HR will administer our second round of civil service exams for the Maumelle Police Department at the end of this month. We had a great recruitment in January, which resulted in 6 new hires for the Maumelle Police Department. And on the topic of Maumelle PD, we made history this month when Chief Corey Pickard promoted Lieutenant Shannon Giampoletti to police captain. Captain G. Spaghetti, as she is so fondly called, is the city's first female police captain. So congratulations to her. I'll close with a few personnel statistics. As of last Friday, we have 264 total employees. 178 are full-time, 86 are part-time, 76 are uniform, and 188 are non-uniform. So as always, I'm happy to entertain any questions. Otherwise, as always, I appreciate your time, attention, and your dedication to our city.
Thank you, ma'am. Councilmember Mosley?
Yes, ma'am. You said 264 employees, and I missed it. Does that include part-time?
That does include part-time, yes, sir. It's 178 full-time.
Okay.
And 86 part-time.
All right.
Of course, that part-time number is a bit inflated for our summer seasonal folks. So we usually have somewhere between 55 and 60 lifeguards, head lifeguards, aquatic staff, and rec aides for the summer.
All right.
We average about 198 employees outside of summer.
Okay, thank you very much.
You bet. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up is the Planning Commission report. Councilmember Mazzoni.
Yeah, it was a short meeting. There was only 2 agenda items, took only about 12 minutes, none of which will be coming to us. The first was the Summit Utility Site Plan modification. They are increasing, they're building a building addition of almost 12,000 square feet, bringing them total up to about 51,000. This will be their meter reader shop, so that's good growth for us here. The second was at the O'Reilly Senior Living, change in plans. They went from one section from level 1 to level 2 care. No difference in number of beds, but by law, instead of 2 stories that they had planned, they had to go to 1 story. So same number of occupants, everything just had to be 1 story. So, both those got approved and that was it.
Thank you very much. With that, we'll move on to procedural motion. At this time, I'd entertain a motion to have all ordinances and resolutions read by title only.
So moved. Second.
I've got a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say yes.
Yes.
All opposed, no. Motion carries. We have no unfinished business, so we'll move on to new business. The first and only item under new business is Resolution 2022-37, amending the 2022 general fund budget. Madam City Clerk, if you could please read that by title only.
A resolution of the City Council of the City of Maumelle, County of Pulaski, State of Arkansas. A resolution to be entitled Resolution Number 2022-37, a resolution to amend the 2022 general fund budget.
All right, thank you. So this is a revenue neutral budget resolution. It has 2 main things that we're appropriating. First is up through this time frame, we had received $1,538 in donations to animal services. We reached out to Chris Davis with Animal Services to determine what he thought their needs were, and he requested that we add that into the medical supplies so they could buy some additional medical supplies. The other issue is the adoption fees that we've got over the first 6 months, and then wanting to use that for veterinary expenses. Councilmember Mosley?
Yes, sir. I was wanting some clarification as far as, I think in the past, before November of 2021, we had a animal rescue group that was paying veterinarians directly for certain procedures to animals and that sort of thing. Are we going to be paying all the veterinarian services in the future?
It appears that way. We don't have an agreement with any third party that they pay for medical expenses.
Okay. So as long as they're on our books, we'll be paying for the veterinary expenses then, it sounds like.
Yes, sir, broadly speaking.
All right. Let's see, also, what about things like in-kind services like pet food? If somebody brings pet food in for a donation, how's that going to be recorded on the books? Do we know?
Liz?
We don't record in-kind donations as financial transactions. They're non-cash transactions. The only donations that we're really recording on our books are monetary donations or donations of capital assets, which is the larger scale donations that we would require because we're not a 501c3. We don't need to keep we can't issue donation receipts, however, for pet food and things like that. So we can issue an in-kind donation receipt, but you won't see that recorded on our books.
Okay. I had a follow-up question for you there, and it slipped my mind. Is cash going to be received at the, for adoption fees and that sort of thing? Is it going to be received at the animal shelter, or will people have to come over to the main city office to pay a donation fee?
Those are taken at Animal Services, just like sanitation fees are collected at the sanitation department, or parks fees are collected at the parks department, so.
Okay, so they'll still handle cash over there then?
Mm-hmm.
All right, thank you. As far as this resolution goes here, it starts out, the first thing it says, the city of Maumelle began charging fees for animals adopted from the shelter and accepting donations in December 2021. I know they didn't make it on the books, but were we not already charging for animal adoptions and accepting donations and things like that there before November?
The animal adoption fee previously went to Maumelle Friends of the Animals.
Okay, did did we charge them, did our personnel charge them and then send it over there to them?
I'm not sure I understand the
Well,
question.
okay, I'm just,
In those instances where the money or the check was accepted and there was no Maumelle Friends of the Animals folks, it would be accepted by city staff.
all right, on behalf of them then.
Yes.
Okay, so the word began is technically then, as far as the city's concerned, we had not charged for adoptions or accepted donations on behalf of the city prior till November.
And I don't know if we had accepted donations ever. Liz may know.
We had, in the last 5 years or so, I think there was about $15 that someone had said, no, I want to donate this here to the city versus to MFOA.
Okay, all right. But we do have like 5 agreements in place now for rescue groups and their primary purpose, I assume, is to advertise and try to help get animals adopted out, but they don't actually handle the adoption. We would handle the adoption now.
Madam City Attorney, I'll let you.
So there are certain animals that for different reasons are not easy for us to adopt out. So they may have already been there for 90 days. They may have a medical condition that's going to require expensive treatment, a few different circumstances like that. In those cases, those rescues are allowed to go ahead and adopt those animals as a rescue. And then once they get everything treated and they find a home for the animal, they then are allowed to charge their own adoption fee. That's part of the agreement that, you know, when they take over and accept the animal and adopt it from us, then it becomes theirs to adopt back out, and so they may receive an adoption fee.
That sounds perfectly reasonable. I mean, once it's left our control and we said it's your animal, then what they want to do with it at their facility or their what do you call it, foster care place or whatever, it's up to them. All right. I would make one. I looked into we were talking about this last week or the last meeting as far as trying to determine whether what we were doing in the past and moving those adoption fees and donations over to the rescue groups. We were trying to figure out if that was legal or not, and the city attorney made a case that it was legal, and you cited that Arkansas Code 2019-101, and it does talk about the city can, it talks about the unusualness of using an animal rescue group such as humane societies and that sort of thing. But it uses the word appropriation. It says the General Assembly finds and declares that the appropriation of public funds for the use of humane societies is okay, but we never appropriated it. So it would appear that we were deficient in that regard and that we never appropriated public funds to do that. And the council was not aware that that was going on. Any comment on that?
What public funds are you saying that we spent?
It was donations and adoption fees.
So the donations were to Maumelle Friends of the Animals, not to the city and then transferred to Friends of the Animals. And then the same thing with the adoption fees.
I know they all just came in and went directly to them. They did not get logged into the city in any way.
Correct. So in some cases, the city collected the money for that entity, which we, as soon as we figured out that was happening, immediately put a stop to that because and that was the issue, that we shouldn't be collecting money for third parties like that, especially without following very stringent requirements to make sure that money is going to where it's supposed to be.
Okay, but that there were probably some donations. If we've gotten donations thus far this year, I would imagine there were some donations over the last 20 years that were intended for the city. So,
So the process also was, the application for adoption of these animals was to Maumelle Friends of the Animals. It was a Maumelle Friends of the Animals application and then also adoption. So the city appropriated money for the animal services, the animal shelter, which basically facilitated the operation of Maumelle Friends of the Animals. But you were applying to Maumelle Friends of the Animals to adopt an animal, and then you were paying them the fee.
yeah, what I'm saying is money probably should have been logged in and then sent back out in some manner. Especially if it was a donation to Maumelle Animal Services. And from what I understand, every donation that came in the door was sent over to them. That was my understanding. So, that's all I've got for now, in case somebody else has some questions. I'm sorry.
Councilmember Holt?
For Ms. Mathis, please. Let me say this, Ms. Mathis. I want you to understand, I'm chatting with you, not at you, okay? I'm not the enemy of Friends of the Animals. I'm not I'm an enemy of the dogs in general. I'm talking about us, and I'm talking about our bookkeeping system. And what everybody else does is their business, okay? So let me focus on what we do, and don't say, well, dogs and people are this, and you know what I mean? I am your friend, believe me, okay? And I appreciate the work you've done for us, so to be for sure. Okay, on the budget itself, paragraph 2, Maumelle Animal Services Department has also incurred additional expenses to prepare animals for adoption, including vaccinations. It says heart work. I think that probably means heartworms, testing, prevention, spaying, and neuterizing. It doesn't say, now we do say how much the donations are, $1,538. It does not say what is the total expenses that we have actually had. Now we're budgeting based on something. So if I may ask, what do we know what the actual expenses are, and why has that not been molded into what our budget is?
So we do know what the actual expenses and the actual revenues that we have received are. So for the, and I believe I pointed that out in the financial report for May. I actually called out some of those numbers in the report. So that if you look back at that May financial report, I talked about specifically what the adoption fees were that we had received to date. That was the end of May. We went through the end of June and looked at the adoption fees. So the $10,500 that's on this budget proposal is actually what we're estimating to be the annual adoption fees based off the first 6 months. So we've gotten about half of that so far this year in the revenue. And then the expenses are actually less than the half of the $10,500. So the veterinary expenses that we've incurred to date did not equal, they weren't quite as much as the adoption fee revenue. But we're allocating all of it there just to kind of keep that in the same place, because we don't know, I mean, Animal Services doesn't know when a pet comes in. Some of them may already be spayed and neutered, some of them aren't. So the cost for each animal to prepare them for the adoption is not exactly the same. The donations, we're only appropriating what we've received through the end of June.
Right.
On the adoption fees and the veterinary expenses, we projected for the year, so that one's kind of a done deal through the end of the year, and we'll include it in the 2023 budget process. But the donations will always be something we'll be coming to you with and saying, okay, we've received about this much year to date, and here's where the best use for it is right now. In looking at their expense lines, they're not over budget on any line, I mean, in their operating expenses as a whole, which is the budgetary level of control for the department. Year to date. They will be, though, with the veterinary expenses and the increased medical expenses that they are now incurring preparing those animals for adoption. So this is This is to kind of help fill that out, to take the revenues that we've got or will be getting this year and allow the council to appropriate those. And the intention of the donations too, to go kind of directly back to the animals, which was part of the reason we selected the line items that we did.
Okay, I went back to a note that you had made back in November, that you intended to come up with a mid-year appropriation once we sort of knew what our actual expenses were. To inquire about the chart here at the bottom of the page, I'll ask for your assistance in clarifying it. You have a current budget, and at the bottom of that, it's 000, and down to the bottom line is $11,550. The second line is the $10,500 twice, and then the donation fees, and then the last one. But the bottom line is $122,184. I tried to figure out mathematically where did that figure come from, and how do we?
That is the current amount that the council has appropriated out of the general fund budget as part of the 2023 budget, or 2022 budget, with the amendments that you've made so far. This amendment will not change that amount. So it's not using part of the fund balance. It's simply appropriating revenues and expenses. So the mayor, I think, when he started, said it had it was a net kind of zero effect. You'll have those revenues. So we're adding $10,500 of a revenue budget, and then we're adding the $10,500 of the expense,
Right.
and then the same thing on the donation. So it's not affecting the fund balance at all.
Okay, so it's put in there, but we're gonna take it out and we're gonna put it over here, in the rest of the budget, so it's evened out, in other words, so we're paying for the last 6 months, not the next 6 months. We're not budgeting for the next 6 months.
No, we are, on the adoption fees and the veterinary expenses. That $10,500 is about double what we've received to date. So we are making an estimation and asking for the appropriation for the year for the veterinary expenses.
Okay,
The donations, you're correct, it's only what we've received year to date, and there was already some budget there, but it'll increase their budget and allow them to spend those donations on medical supplies.
okay. I admit had some help with this, so let me walk through this, and I'm talking with you and not at you, with your enduring patience, and I appreciate that. The first question is, how many animals were brought to the animal services during the first 6 months of 2022? It was over 150, so I know that number. How many animals have been adopted in 2022? That was over 100. The question is, how many returned adoptions? How many returned from fostering? How many returned from rescue? How many transferred to other entities? How many died in the shelter, if any? Had to be euthanized. How many were fostered? I made a copy of this, so I would be glad to just leave it with you.
I don't have any of that information and wouldn't have any of that information.
Mr. Mayor, would we get
so-
that from what source?
Animal Services?
Would I get that from Chris? Would he have that?
Yes, sir, we can get that for you.
Okay,
Or you're welcome to reach out to him individually.
okay. I think that it's, we are talking about a budget, and we're talking about all these factors. I'm not pretending to have the answers one way or the other. I just think that we need to explore as many areas as we can so that we close as many loopholes as we have. Would you agree? Maybe we've had some loopholes in the past.
Absolutely, and I'll just be very frank with you all. I've been working on reconciliations and audits. I have not had an opportunity to go out and do internal control checks and look at processes all over the city. It's certainly something I plan to do, and it's something that we should be doing and we will be doing. But there have been priorities, and that one hasn't made it up the list quite that far yet. I do feel like everything that our staff are doing, though, is there are processes in place. There's receipt books. They all tie out. They provide us copies of the receipts every day with the deposits. We have systems of double checks in place. And our auditors have been looking at all of that stuff, and they do and have been following it all the way down to the transaction level. So the city funds that we're handling, there are good controls in place. Could they be better? Yes, possibly. And one of the ways we're making that better was with this new software implementation, which gets us out of a bunch of paper records too, and gets it into some software systems. And that'll improve some of the internal controls, make better the ones that are already there.
Right.
And so
Right.
that'll happen in the next month and a half. I think we go live in August, so.
Well, I'm not a no vote. I will vote in favor, of course, of the budget. But I think that these questions can have some help and some assistance in deciding what our future budget, what budget do we need, right? I mean, so that's why I'm coming up with them to explore them. There were 3 or 4 more, but that's, you know, that's a sampling of what we're talking about. So I hope that we will pursue that. I definitely will visit with Chris and at the animal shelter, and we'll continue to explore these things so that we can just, for our own needs, we can sit back and say, we are doing everything we can to give the public, if there's any questions, come on, we'll answer them. But I don't want to make it look like, well, you know, you're some of this and some of that, you know what I mean? I mean, I'm being facetious, but I want to know the truth.
Absolutely.
And I respect you. I'm not suggesting you don't. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Councilmember Williams?
I make a motion that we adopt resolution number 2022-37.
We have a motion and a second. Councilmember Mosley?
Yes, I meant to catch you before you left there, but I just wanted to ask you, as much as possible, I think it would probably be best for controls if you could eliminate cash handling at some of these locations, like maybe animal control and public works and that sort of thing. It might actually, in other words, could they look into the idea of them just issuing somebody a voucher with them then coming by here and
I don't know that we have the infrastructure to handle that even here, because we're not collecting payments here at all anymore, other than in the planning and permits department. I
that's
think
what
we have systems in place that issue, that will be issuing electronic receipts and recording it into the software system and doing things like that. And most of our locations also have, I mean, Parks and Recreation has their own cashiering software, Seniors has their own cashiering software, and we're tying to their reports every day. So, I mean, I don't see an issue with that. We've not had any issues with receipt numbers being out of sequence or missing receipts or anything like that, so.
okay.
Unless the city suddenly decided not to take cash at all anymore, which would be really challenging. When you're charging $5 fees and $10 fees, which is what the board, like the tags and stuff like that, which is what Animal Services actually does a little more of, that would be really hard. The pool, I mean, that's where the majority of our cash comes from, is those touch points there. But we have, I mean, those deposits are receipted, they're reconciled by department staff, and then they're reconciled by finance staff, and then they're double checked by finance staff, and then the bank account is reconciled by somebody different and double checked by somebody different. So I think there's a lot of different internal controls and checks on that stuff.
Okay, you've been aware of all those others, but you weren't that aware of what was going on at Animal Services, I take it?
I was aware of the handling of the city cash funds. I had reviewed all of our cash receipting that was coming in through our office. I was not aware that Animal Services was partnering with another organization to the extent that they were. But the city funds, the receipt books that we have for all those time periods, all of the city funds are accounted for.
Okay, thank you. I did want to urge you as much as possible to get those as tight as possible. Thanks.
I believe they are.
I do have one other question here. I'm not opposed to the resolution, but as long as we're on the subject, I wanted to ask this one question. I have a person who's obtained a lot of information from the city about the workings of Maumelle Animal Services, and they came across some type of an agreement with an organization called Best Friends. Are you all aware of that? It was something that was signed by,
I've read that agreement. I don't have it with me, but
Yeah.
it's, primarily, I think it's to, help them, like, publicize the animals that we have available for adoption, get them, like, to a little bit wider network for them to be seen.
okay, because, yeah, I read what they had there as the agreement, and I couldn't see that anybody was doing anything. So I wasn't sure if it was just a club you were subscribing to, and somebody said they thought it was a pit bull organization. I didn't know if we're not donating money to a pit bull organization.
We're not donating money to anybody
Okay.
that I'm aware of.
I had to ask, thank you. Yeah, I don't have any problem with the resolution. That's what we need to be doing here, so thank you.
No,
Thank you, sir.
it's a nonprofit, but I just don't, I didn't review it tonight, so I don't remember.
All right, we have a motion and a second on Resolution 2022-37. Is there any additional discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say yes.
Yes.
All opposed, no. Motion carries. That concludes unfinished business. For mayor's comments, first of all, I took a note here. We're often talking about how we're working on streamlining things through the use of technology. We talked about that a little bit. Liz just did with some of the finance software. You all have heard that we've been talking about OpenGov and how we're using that for permit tracking and monitoring the workflows of all sorts of contractors, specifically the boring crews. Just as a prime example to illustrate how this technology is being used, while we were sitting here and that gentleman was complaining, making a legitimate complaint about his yard at 14 Zircon, I sent a text message to a few folks. Scott Grummer in the back had already inputted that in the permit tracking software as an inspection item that needs to be completed. And so what that means is before that permit can ever be closed out and marked as complete, so that they can kind of move on to the next area, someone is going to go by and verify 14 Zircon. And he was able to do that with his phones. The inspectors were able to do that in the field. All we need to know, and we're inspecting, but when you're inspecting whole neighborhoods, we don't know your front yards and the way they looked as well as you do or your constituents do. So as long as we know of issues, we have a way to track it down to the patch of dried, dead grass placed in one person's yard. We just need to know about it. So that was a neat example that's really on point. Fourth Fest was really eventful. It was a little bit hot and humid for those that were able to come. The parade had a lot more entries, I think, than it has in recent years. Turnout at the parade was fair. About the fireworks show, had somebody tell me today they thought it was the best fireworks show ever, but I think we hear that every year, so either it's improving every year or sometimes a particular show just resonates with people differently. Councilmember Mosley had asked for a few numbers on the fireworks calls that we had. We had a total of this 4th of July season, a total of 21 firework calls. 5 of those calls were on July 2nd. 6 of those calls were on July 3rd. 10 of those calls were on July 4th. 5 of those 10 were during the designated hours that fireworks are permitted to be discharged under certain circumstances, and only 5 this year were after the 10:30 deadline, and the last one that we received was at 11:13 p.m. No citations were issued on that. No citations.
Are we enforcing the ordinance? I mean, if the police come across somebody shooting on July 2nd, 3rd, and out of normal hours on 4th, are they issuing citations or at least talking to folks trying to get them to quit?
Absolutely. So one of my favorite pastimes is at about 10:30, turning on the police scanner, and about 10:35, usually a lieutenant or someone gets on the radio and says, okay, we're ready for the calls. And I've done ride-alongs several years where you're driving around and there, it is like an operation out there. Oftentimes, we don't have exact addresses of where fireworks are being shot. It's coming from behind me at this street, I think. Well, it wasn't behind them at that street, it was 4 streets over, and so there's a little dragnet going around town. Again, this year, we only had 5 calls, though, after 10:35. So that's, I think, the lowest that we've had in quite a while.
Yeah, that's too bad.
There were 2 fires. One was a little grass fire and one was a dumpster fire. Both were easily put out. I was talking with Interim Chief Scotty Eaton, who said that last night in North Little Rock, they had so many different of these sort of things going on that all of their fire trucks were out on the scenes and they were having police officers drive by their fire station to pick up fire extinguishers. And of course, you're not allowed to shoot fireworks in North Little Rock city limits. So if anything, our making it permissible during certain timeframes seems to be decreasing the amount of those sort of incidents. So I found that interesting. I wasn't sure if I was supposed to say that, Scott. I'm sure he'll let me know.
I'd mention one other complaint I got today. I got one from a gentleman, I guess, that works at an office next to the Maumelle Country Club golf course. I think this is I don't know if it was last year or the year before, but he was complaining about people shooting in his parking lot. And I wonder if the chief could put that just on his to-do list for next year to see if he can catch them and shut them down on next July 4th.
He's shaking his head yes back there. A lot of times it's easier if we know that that's there, and they can put it on their drive-by list, and you'll drive by once or twice or 3 times, but they're not going to camp out there. I drove out to that area. I'd seen a photograph that made it not look that bad.
Yeah, it didn't look too bad, but
it was actually. I mean, I drove out. There was a lot of like black cats, the little black cats that were scattered everywhere and don't really picture very well. But yeah, it was more messy than I thought it was going to be.
But I would say one thing for the residents of Maumelle, I think they clean up after themselves. There was a big display going on that I had to stop for on Barber. Next morning I didn't see a thing, so they got out there and cleaned it up. So that's great. Thank you.
That is true. I wanted to shout out Parks and Rec. They do a really good job with this event. My wife, who puts on shows and is in the event business, was pointing out, she kept saying, well, who handles that over there? And I said, oh, that's Parks and Rec. And who handles that over there? That's Parks and Rec. And we just kept going down that list, and it really, a good event looks easy. That's the hallmark of a good event. But I think the Parks and Rec staff do a great job. I was out there this morning before lunch, and the park wasn't spotless, but compared to how it looked last night, I mean, there was all hands on deck. By midday, the park was looking really good, and so they do a great job. Shout out to them. No one's here to hear it, but it's so hot. Yeah, it's so hot. Yeah. That concludes mayor's comments. We'll move on to council member comments. City attorney comments.
No comments.
City clerk comments.
No comments.
At this time, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn. We've got a motion and a second. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say yes. Yes. All opposed, no. Motion carries.